Okay guys, so welcome back to episode 3 of color grading for EDIUS 6, Grass Valley's EDIUS 6, and I stress version 6 because in version 6 there were many awesome upgrades, and one of those includes this new freeform mask tool, which we're going to jump right into right now. Now remember earlier in a couple of the previous tutorials I mentioned that once we start grading things we might lose a skin tone, or skin tones get destroyed or ruined, and I didn't really cover how we can fix that. Now there are a few ways to do it, and one of the ways is to actually use this mask tool. So I'm just going to drop that mask tool on, and let me just quickly run through what the mask tool is and how it works. I'm going to get into some more advanced stuff later, but let's just start with the basics. So first of all, a mask is basically an area that we can select in our image and only affect that part of the image. And you'll see what I mean if I just draw a square here, and if I just put that there, we can actually add a filter inside that mask or square just by clicking inside and click tick filter, and then we go here and we say select filter, and we can just choose, let's just choose for this one today the color wheel, for example, and then we can go to the settings of the color wheel, and when we actually make an adjustment you can see that my mask is only affected in that area. My filter, the color wheel, has only been affected in that area. So that's the power of this mask tool. Now you might think, well, that's not very powerful. How is a green square powerful? Well, that's just a square. We also have an oval or a circle, elliptical tool we can use, or we have, and this is where the real power comes into it, we have an absolute unlimited point freeform mask tool with Bezier handles. So we can create a mask that fits exactly anything that we want to trace around. So we can actually rotoscope, we can do so much more things in EDIUS than we can ever do before. So I'm going to get into that and its uses a little bit more in a second. But before I do, let's just jump back to this skin tones thing I was talking about, and let's have a look at how the three-way color corrector can help us with that. So we'll be using the mask tool next, but first of all I just want to sort of wrap up the last filters that we've been learning and show you all the power that each one has. So let's put on a three-way color corrector on this shot right now. Now if we open the three-way color corrector, we have our familiar wheels that we were talking about earlier, where we can have our midtones changed here and our shadows changed here and our highlights changed here. Now I never did mention that each section also has its own saturation slider, so we could in fact just affect the saturation of the midtones with that slider, and similarly with contrast, so we can affect the contrast of the midtones too. So these sliders actually give us another 2 steps of freedom and control when we're adjusting anything with the three-way color corrector. But the next cool thing is this limiting tool. Now we never discussed this before, but the limiting tool allows us, just like we did with the mask, but more specifically this time, allows us to choose an area of our image based on 3 separate things. Our hue, so we could choose an area of our image to affect based on its color. We could choose an area of our image based on its saturation only, or we could choose an area based on its luminance only, and finally we could choose each and every one of those all together, or one or the other. So let me show you how powerful that really is. Now before I do though, let's click this little histogram display button here, and that's actually showing us where all this information lies. So if you look, if we turn that off, we can see nothing. We turn it on, we see little histograms here that display, and it's saying that, yeah, there's a lot of blue in this image. Look at this, there's a lot of blue in this image, and a bit of bluey green as well. And then if you have a look over here, it's also saying there's a fair bit of orange in here, and that's what I'm guessing is to be skin tones and this tail light over here. Same in saturation, it's saying that most of the saturation of this image lies within the shadows. I mean, there is some saturation here as well. Then finally we have a look at the luminance histogram, and it's saying here is how the luminance is distributed throughout this image, which is quite broad obviously because we have dark shadows and we have bright highlights, so that makes sense too. So that hasn't really helped us actually change anything just yet. That just helps us have a look at our information on a graphical scale. So next up we want to actually limit our effect. Now since we haven't ticked any of these limitation boxes, if I say slide this into blue, then everything's being changed, but I don't want that. What I actually want to do is select his skin tones only. Now let's try and do that by selecting hue. So we'll click hue, we're going to limit the hue, and now we're going to slide this over into skin tones. And these are our little handles here. You can see we could have them hard up against each other, which says just select this color area, or you can sort of have a curved edge and say I mainly want to select this color in the middle, but also start feathering into into account these colors on the right and the left here. So that's what these handles mean, and that's how they work. So what we want to do is find our skin tone range, which is around here, and we know that because of our graph, and we also know because we have skin tones here. So that's, so far we haven't changed anything yet. All we've done is saying we want to limit that color. So let's have a look at what the limitation is by clicking this Show Key button. Now you can see straight away when I move that into skin tones, you can see, yes, we have created a key that's only selecting his skin, but hold on a second, we're also selecting this, and let's turn the key off. We're also selecting this area here because, yes, in fact, there are skin tones here, even though that's not skin. So that's something we're going to have to combat later. But let's just use this as an example for now. So now we have selected skin tones, but because we're using H.264 compression footage from the Canon 5D Mark II, you can see some blocky, ugly artifacting here. And the idea of a key is that we want it to be as smooth and as gradual as possible while still maintaining the area that we want to select. So next up, we're going to also help us, to help our selection, we're going to use a saturation limiter as well. Now, you'll notice as soon as I turn that on, my selection almost disappeared. I've still got some here. But if we have a look, what's more saturated, his skin or this thing here, this tail light? This tail light is actually more saturated. And if we look at our histogram here, we're saying we want to include this area here, and according to our histogram, there's not much in that area. So what do we have to do? We have to push our selection down into the histogram level. Aha! Now we're getting a much nicer key, and we could say, yeah, we want to include more of that skin and not feather it as much. And as far as I'm concerned, that's looking pretty good. Now we're ready to start affecting that area only. So let's turn our key off. And finally, we could use a luminance value as well to help select and say, you know, we don't want to select the shadow parts of his glasses, so the luminance canceller is going to help with that, and you'll be able to see how that's doing that. It just adds an extra level of smoothness to your selection. And there we have our selection, but once again, nothing has been changed yet. So the next thing we want to do is change something. So watch this. If I push this into blue, his skin goes blue. Pretty cool. It's not really cool as in it's not going to help us if we make his skin blue, but I'm going to show you how powerful and useful this limiting tool is. So hopefully you understood that, but let's just cancel that. Let's just delete our three-way color corrector and delete our mask, which we haven't actually used yet. Now, I think I've jumped ahead a little bit here. I didn't want to really jump this far ahead just now. This was going to be the next tutorial, but let's just go for it. So, because it's more fun this way, and I think people learn better when it's fun, true? So if we have a look at some reference images I got from Google, I just downloaded these shots from Transformers. There's a few stills from the Google image search. Now these stills are very representative of Michael Bay's color grading look, and I'm actually a big fan of Michael Bay's look because it's a very blockbuster look. His skin tones are nice and warm, yet his shadows and just below midtones are all sort of blue, and I love this look. But how do you achieve it? Alright, let's have a try then, shall we? Let's first of all try and get some contrast back into this image, and we know how to do that. So we'll put a YUV curve on top of here. We'll double click that, and we will crush the blacks a little bit. Okay, so if we can split the screen and just have a look what we've done there, just a subtle increase in contrast. Next up, I just want to add a blue tone to this whole image. I just want to give it that Michael Bay blue. So let's do that. So we'll go to, a good way to do that actually, there's a few ways to do it. You could always use color balance. You could drop that on top of there, go to color balance, and just put blue into it like so. So that's one way you can do it. But that's affecting all channels at once. Remember that? It's affecting your shadows, your mids, and your highlights all at once. And remember, I don't like doing that. I like to have the control and freedom. So let's just use a three-way color corrector, double click that, and in my midtones I'm just going to push blue. So there we have, and we can always compare that to the shot here. Let's try and get that similar sort of greeny blue look that I can see in the buildings back here. We're just going to do that by eye for now, just because I'm rushing through this, because I want to demonstrate what I'm talking about. Okay, so there's our bluey sort of look, but you can see that the skin has been destroyed. The skin is green as well. We don't want that, especially when you look at this reference shot where our skin is nice and warm. So how are we going to combat that? We're going to use that limiting tool. We're going to use it just like we did before. Now, there's one thing I need to tell you before we go any further. This is really important. We need to change some settings within EDIUS to be able to see a final result look of our color grade, and I'll show you what I mean by that. If we go up to settings and then user settings, now within user settings we need to click on preview and expand that, and go, once you click on preview, you can see down here we have a list of checkboxes, and yours may not be ticked. It says here, combine filter layers and track layers for effect settings. So if we untick that, all it's going to show us when we double click a filter is the effect that that filter has only. But as soon as we click this combine button, then it's going to show us the combination of all filters above your filter, and that's exactly what we want. So we need to apply that, and make sure you press apply and OK, and then we can continue on. So first of all, we have our YUV curve which adds contrast. Second of all, we have our sort of overall, what you could call, tint. So our whole image is greeny blue, kind of like Michael Bay's look on the left here. Now, third thing we want to do is add a three-way color corrector, and this time we want to select his skin tones only. Now, there's something very important to notice here. EDIUS, like many color correction facilities, works in a stacking order, which means that anything underneath is going to be affected by a filter above it. In other words, if we have this skin tone selection underneath our tint, it's actually going to be quite hard to find skin tones in this image because they've been crushed out. Let's have a quick attempt at that. We'll click Limit Hue, and let's have a look at our histogram. Now remember, our histogram before actually had a lot more information in our orange channel here, in our skin tones, didn't it? So it's going to be no good to have this three-way color corrector on the bottom level. So let's cancel that and put it on the top level. So now when we go into three-way color corrector and we show our histogram, there's our skin tones, they're back. So now we can click Hue, we're going to limit the hue, slide that over into skin tones, and let's have a look at the key, and then we can go to the saturation and help refine that key, and we could use luminance as well, and there we go, we have a pretty nice looking key considering we're using such compressed footage. And we can just adjust that, just try and get the smoothest edge you can. We get rid of blocks, and remembering that anything that is white is going to let through the skin tones that we want. Anything that's black is going to be keyed out, and anything that's grey in between is going to be a variation of the two. So that's looking pretty good. Now the next thing we're going to do is actually push saturation back into the skin. So if we max that out, you can see, yeah, we've got saturation back in there, but the problem is there's still green in there because of our tint underneath. So what we need to do is actually push warmth into the skin, and obviously you can spend a bit more time than I am really trying to finesse that skin, but you can see now as we scrub through, we're getting closer, much closer to a Michael Bay look. And if we split the screen, you can see there the skin is back, and you can see that the rest of the image is unaffected. So that's pretty cool, and that's one really powerful way to use the three-way color corrector. So it's not just for correcting white balances. If you really know how to use this tool and use the features that are built into it, it has a lot of potential, So what I'm going to show you next is pretty cool, because you can see so far that we've stacked 3 filters to get a certain look. And once again, you can perfect this look. I'm just rushing through it. But remember, we saw earlier we have skin tones in the background here. Well, what if we said that we want to not include that area, but we still want to use this three-way color correcting limiter? Well, let's do that as well. Let's delete that top skin layer. There goes our beautiful skin, sorry about that. And we'll go to effects, we'll grab our new mask filter, drop that on top. Now, once again, we need to move our mask filter above the other filters because we are going to be selecting a skin tone. So we'll open the mask tool, and what we're going to do is grab this elliptical mask and just draw a very rough oval shaped mask. Now, we could, painstakingly go through here and rotoscope this dude's face. That's possible. And it's keyframeable, everything is keyframeable in here, it's amazing. But there's no point in doing that if we can combine these two filters together. What if we have a mask, and then inside the mask we use a three-way color corrector with the hue limiter? Ultimate power, that's exactly what that is. So let's give that a go, keeping in mind that this is real-time performance. We don't have to render this stuff. So what I'm going to do now is track this guy's face real quick. And because we're running out of screen space here, I'm just going to shrink this down to say 25% so we can see it a little easier. So there's our mask, and we're going to go to the first frame of our shot. We're going to place that over his face, and we're going to click Shape, Enable Keyframes for Shape, and we're going to set a keyframe for all of these parameters here. You can see inside the parameters the anchor point, the position, scale, and rotation. We want keyframes for all of those things. Now in EDIUS, as soon as you place one keyframe and say yes, I want keyframes enabled, then whenever you make a change to that mask, it will automatically add a new keyframe. So we're going to jump forward here in chunks and just move that over his face, and then here move that there, and move it there as well. And this is just a real quick way to track something in EDIUS. And then we just go into the middle of each one of those keyframes and just refine it, just making sure that we really are sticking to the guy's skin, which it's done a pretty good job anyway. And we could in fact add a separate secondary mask to his hand there if we really wanted to. I mean, we could keyframe something around his hand as well, but we're not going to, just for this tutorial, just to keep it a bit simpler. So okay, there we have a mask, but nothing's really happened yet. So what we need to do is add a filter inside the mask. But the cool thing is, at least that mask is sticking to the guy's face. It's being tracked. So that's some powerful shit right there. Next up, we're going to add a filter inside the mask. So we click filter on enable filter there. We go here, and what we're going to look for is that magic three-way color corrector. And here it is here. And we need to set that filter up. So let's open the dialog box for that. We want to limit skin tones. We don't really need to use the histogram for this. So we're going to limit skin tones like so. And we're going to have a look at our key. And you can see, yes, we're limiting skin tones based on that white key. That's good. But you can see that our key has a hard edge. We don't want that, and we'll be able to fix that in a moment. So what we're going to do is just refine that key a little bit, try and get a smoother edge. That's looking a bit better. And once again, we can push warmth back in there. Let's find a better frame to do that. We can push some warmth back in there and add some saturation. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Next up, we want to soften the edge of that mask. So we can go to Edge, click Soft. Now we have the option to soften both the inside and the outside edge of the mask, or both. And in this case, I'm going to choose both. We'll soften it by about 250 pixels. Now if I press OK, now we have done what we did before, but we've gone an extra step further because we're only selecting this guy's face. We're not selecting this area as well. So now we've created a pretty cool Michael Bay look in a matter of minutes. And I mean, that's got a keyframed mask in it. It's got a wavy curve for added contrast, and essentially has two three-way color correctors. But you can see that just using simple filters, I've created quite a stylistic look. And like I said before, you can really, finesse this and spend time on it, and make something a lot nicer than I've created here. But the principles are there, and that's what I wanted to teach you. So one more thing, just before I wrap up this skin tone section, is that what we can do now is we spent a fair bit of time on that shot. What we can actually do is highlight these three filters, right click and go Save as Current User Preset. Now if we go to our Effects tab, you'll see a new user preset has been created with that little yellow U there. Now what it's saying is that this filter has a mask, a wavy, and a three-way color corrector within it. And that's cool, but what if we right click on that and go change name? We could call that Michael Bay Look. So now we have a Michael Bay look that I could, for instance, I could delete the filter we have on here, the filters. There's the original shot, go to my effects, grab my Michael Bay look, drop it on, and bang, there's my Michael Bay look. It's saved as a preset. And over the years, I've actually built my own library of presets that I've created, where I've spent a lot of time, and each one of those presets, I can just drop on any clip and just tweak them individually to get the desired look that I want. So yeah, that's pretty exciting stuff, and that's an example where we can use the mask combined with other filters to really get a Hollywood look and really just get ultimate control over our image. I'm going to finish up with one more Michael Bay look. Michael Bay's just got, he's just my flavor of the month when it comes to color grading at the moment. I'm just loving his shit. So here's another shot from New York that I shot. And I actually deliberately tried to find a place in New York where there was a lot of yellow in the scene combined with the yellow cabs, because I was actually shooting a cool little film in New York that was, it had to be very New York. So it had to have elements of New York, and to me, a taxi cab, a yellow cab in New York is a big deal. So yeah, I think this scene works pretty well in terms of yellow. But what I want to, I think it works well as well, is that we can match it to another Michael Bay shot. I mean, this is from Transformers as well. Once again, just downloaded this from Google. You can do that yourself. And what we're going to try and do is match that bluey tone in the background. And again, we'll use the three-way color corrector to separate this yellow. Actually, you know what? We're going to use a different technique to separate that yellow. Yeah, there's another way to do it, and I'll show you that too. It's the same principle, but anyway, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to rush through it a little quicker because I've already shown you most of these techniques. First of all, I'm going to drop my YUV curve on there and affect contrast because this was shot with the CineStyle preset, which is very, very flat. So we lose a lot of black point. We don't actually have a black point there. So what we can do is create a very subtle contrast curve, and as you can see straight away, let's split the screen, that we have our subtle contrast back, and that's what we want. And we could in fact try and bring out detail in the sky back there. Let's have a look if there's any. Yes, there is. Have a look. So we can create first of all a subtle contrast curve, and then we can add extra anchor points. And now where is that sky? Where is it? Just push them around until you find it. There are our clouds back there. So now what we've done essentially is we've added contrast, but we've maintained some detail in the sky back there as well. So there's our crazy looking YUV curve, and yep, next step, let's press OK. So next step is I want to add that blue tint to the whole thing. So what we're going to do is grab our three-way color corrector and drop that on here. Now you'll actually notice that this time we're not going to just affect the grey point, and we're not just going to affect our midtones, we also want to affect our white point too. And I'll show you why. Because you can see our white point in Michael Bay's film's not actually white. It's a little bit warmer than white. It's a bit yellow. And our black points are also a little warm. So we can play with that as well. It's very subtle, but that's the beauty of EDIUS and these controls. We can really add subtlety to it. So let's just slide in some blue here. And there we go. We're getting close already. Getting close already. And we can... If we slide this to extreme, you can see what it's affecting, which is all the darker areas of our image, and that's the whole idea. So what we can do is add a little bit of green into our shadows, but not too much. And it's not looking very good yet, but it will. So we're going to split the screen and have a look. And there's our bluey sort of look. I'm not real happy with it just yet. We can play with the saturation and really pumping that blue. Okay, so that's looking okay. It's not bad. And we can press OK in that. So now we have our bluey sort of Michael Bay look, but the problem is the whole reason I shot this scene was because of the yellow, and to me the yellow looks disgusting now. It looks like a sickening... It doesn't look nice and warm like Bumblebee, so let's see if we can combat that. Now there's a filter we haven't played with yet, but it addresses the same principles as our limiting tool in the three-way color corrector, but this gives us a different form of control. Now let's have a look at the chrominance filter. Let's drop the chrominance filter on top of there. Now remembering that we want our chrominance filter to be above, because whenever we're trying to select a color, we want the most information possible. So let's go above and double click chrominance. Now chrominance is a little easier when it comes to selecting color, because all we actually have to do is click the color. So we can click show key, and let's click the yellow. And straight away, if we just click around different yellow parts of the image, you can see it's selecting that yellow. Now once we have a basic sort of yellow that we're happy with, which is, you know, maybe that, we can refine that. So let's turn our key off and on. We can go back over here to these top menu items here. So our effect, which we haven't actually set yet, will be set in here. But also we have the control over our alpha shape. We have control over the matte, the key that's being generated. We can add softness to its edge. So you can see here that we can slide that to the right and actually soften the edges of our matte. Now that's really powerful stuff just there. So let's just soften that by say 3 pixels, just to give it a nice, really fine edge. And next up we're going to go to the key color and affect the parameters of that. So once we can just click and find the color we want just to get the basic color, and you can see as I click around the color's changing here. But let's go back to yellow. And let's find a yellow that selects most of our cab. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now we can actually manually adjust the color in here if we liked. But what we're going to do next is go to the color luminance tab and affect the chroma base. Now this is sort of expanding the power of that color's key selection. And as you can see now, we're really selecting more variations of that yellow, which is good because we want all of that yellow. So I'm sliding that all the way up to 512, and the range we can increase that as well. But you got to be careful because when we go too far, we're actually selecting yellow that's in the building, yellow that's on the road, and we don't actually want that. We just want to select these vibrant yellow images here. So now we have a cool key, it's looking pretty good, and we could adjust the luminance value of that key as well. We're not going to. So let's untick key, go back to the effect, and click on the inside filter, which is currently set to nothing. So we go to the inside filter, and we want to find our favorite three-way color corrector, which is where? Here it is, three-way color corrector. Click setup, and then once again we can slide that around and change the color of the cab or whatever we like. Now that could be used as a cool effect, but in this instance it's not really an effect we're looking for. We're looking for the ability to match the color of Bumblebee, as we can see here. So let's just get out of that ugly sort of sickening yellow and push it into that warm yellow which is there. Maybe even lower the saturation and push it into, yeah, here we go. Here we go. So now we're getting into that Bumblebee yellow, that Bumblebee orange almost. And you can see if we split the screen here, there's quite a difference in the yellow. And you'll also notice that nothing else in the image is being affected thanks to our chrominance key, which is here. So now we have created almost a Michael Bay look. I mean, it definitely needs refining. I'm not saying it looks good, it actually looks terrible. But the principles have been explained, and that's what I really want to show you here, is that we can create Hollywood looks within EDIUS in real time with ease, because these native filters within EDIUS are just extremely powerful as long as you know how to use them. So once again, we can save that filter. I mean, I could even say that these shots were part of the same film, maybe. And maybe this taxi is going to transform into Bumblebee and blow like some buildings away. That'd be pretty cool. Bumblebee wouldn't do that, he's nice. Anyway, so yeah, once again we can save that filter set. So we can highlight all of those just by dragging a box around them. Right click, making sure you click save as current user preset, not as separate presets. That way it'll save each separate filter as a separate preset, but we just want them as a group. So let's say that, go to our effect, and we could call this Bumblebee Yellow. So there we have our Michael Bay look. If we just go into New York again and grab another city shot, maybe this one here, and we have a look there, we've got some more cab action. We can just grab that effect from our effect list, drag it on top, and whammo. There we have our Michael Bay look straight in there. Amazing stuff, amazing stuff. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode 3 of my color correction series for Grass Valley's EDIUS 6. Next up we're going to be even going further with looks and stacking filters and really using these new skill sets that we have to really push the creativity levels of your color grading and yeah, seeing where we can take it. So yeah, I'll see you on the next episode. My name's Matt Scott. Enjoy!